A lot of harm has been done by fundamentalist religion, and it's very important to face that. Not all of the analysis of the new atheists is false, and I have great sympathy with some of their criticisms of what one might call the unacceptable face of religion. But I would make several points. The first thing is that they run into an immense danger by lumping all religions together. And any classification that puts peace-loving Amish, for example, and Quakers in the same category as fundamentalist Islamic radical terrorists is almost useless. I've been, in fact, quite encouraged recently to see that Sam Harris publicly distanced himself from this attitude in front of Dawkins and co. and says, until we learn to differentiate between religions, we're going to outrage, and quite rightly so, people of moderate faith. So I think the first thing, and I said this to Richard Dawkins, that he, for example, wants me to distinguish between atheists. I pointed out that Stalin was an atheist, so was Richard Dawkins. Would they want me to attribute the kind of atrocities that Stalin committed to them? Of course they wouldn't, and I'd protect them against that accusation. So if they want us to distinguish between atheist and atheist, I think it's only fair to demand that they distinguish between religion and religion. So that's the first couple of points I would make on that. The second important thing is when it comes to Christianity, and of course I speak as a Christian, I can't act as a spokesman for other religions. They would have to defend themselves against these charges. But as a Christian, I would want to say firstly that I'm utterly ashamed of the kind of attitude that was shown in the Crusades, where professing Christians, Christendom, marched on the Turks and the Muslims and slaughtered them hip and thigh. And I would want to argue that this is totally unacceptable. But simultaneously, I'd want to say that this was not obedience to Christ that produced this violent behavior, it was disobedience. And that's very important to see that historically Christ was tried, indeed, for being a terrorist. He was accused of the very thing that the new atheists are accusing religion of, and Pilate, the Roman procurator, publicly exonerated him from it. So that to accuse Christ of fomenting religious insurrection is simply false. He famously said to Pilate that his kingdom was not from this world, and he explained what he meant by it. Otherwise, my servants would have been fighting so that I shouldn't have been delivered to the Jews. So the Christian stand, presumably, following Christ means to renounce violence. And I think it's immensely important to say that that's not true Christianity, it's disobedience to Christianity. But then we notice another and very important phenomenon. It seems to me the new atheists are very, very thin on their historical understanding. First of all, they want to make religion responsible for a great deal of violence and suggest that violence and cruelty lie at the heart of religion. But then simultaneously, they want to suggest that atheism had nothing to do with the atrocities of Pol Pot, Stalin and Mao Zedong, to name three of the leaders of the most atheistic regimes that the world has seen. So they airbrush out 20th century history. And Richard Dawkins says he can't imagine an atheist who would destroy Chartres or any of the great cathedrals of the world. Well, that seems to be abysmal ignorance of what Stalin did in Russia. Thousands of churches razed to the ground and Christians persecuted and so on. So one of the things that concerns me about the new atheist take on religion and on atheism is that they're wrong on both counts, and they're wrong because of their very superficial attitude to history. Now, I expect them to be very negative towards theology, but to have such a shallow and inaccurate view of history strikes me as very dangerous.